Rough hands have hacked her hair down to bloody stubble. Iron shackles bite into wrists rubbed raw from 3 days of questioning. Around her, black-robed inquisitors move in practiced formation, their faces hidden beneath pointed hoods, transforming men of God into something far more sinister. She whispers a prayer in Spanish, not Latin. This simple act, praying in her native tongue rather than the Church's sacred language, has condemned her. The charge reads, heresy. But what it really means is that she dared to speak to God without permission, without intermediaries, without the elaborate machinery of institutional religion that demanded absolute submission. Listen carefully. That sound you hear? It's not whined through the stone corridors. It's the collected breath of 12 other women imprisoned in cells along this hallway, each awaiting their turn in this chamber. Each knowing that confession brings not mercy but merely a different flavor of horror. Here's what they never taught you in history class. Captured female heretics didn't just face torture or execution. The Church had perfected something far more sophisticated, punishments that weaponized faith itself against these women. Some would be transformed into living symbols of degradation, paraded through cities as broken warnings. Others would disappear into convents, not as nuns, but as slaves whose existence was slowly erased. The fortunate ones died quickly. The unfortunate discovered that the Church's imagination for suffering exceeded even hell's reputation. And buried in Vatican archives, locked away for centuries, are records of punishments so grotesque that even medieval chroniclers, men who described battlefield dismemberments with clinical detail, refused to document them fully. They would write only the usual penalties were applied, or justice was served according to custom, leaving historians to piece together from scattered clues what actually happened in those torch-lit chambers. What Maria doesn't know yet, kneeling on that stone floor, is that her captors have already decided her fate. The confession they're extracting through starvation and sleeplessness is merely bureaucratic procedure. Her punishment was chosen the moment she was denounced by her neighbor, a woman who coveted Maria's small cloth-dyeing business. She will not burn. Burning would make her a martyr, and the Inquisition has learned that martyrs inspire resistance. Instead, she faces something that will take years to kill her, something that will transform her from a woman who dared to think into a creature so broken that other women will cross themselves when they see what remains. The last punishment we'll explore tonight has been deliberately obscured from historical record. Not because it was too violent, the medieval world celebrated violence, but because it revealed something about power and control that even the Inquisition preferred to keep hidden. When you learn what they did to women whose only crime was reading the Bible in their own language, you'll understand why some secrets are buried deeper than graves. Before diving into these forgotten stories of institutional cruelty, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. They called it The Question, as if torture could be reduced to punctuation. Medieval jurisprudence operated on a simple principle: pain produces truth. The Inquisitor's chamber was designed as a machine for manufacturing confessions, each element calculated to break down resistance before physical torture even began. Female heretics faced a system refined over centuries specifically to exploit every vulnerability women possessed in a world that already considered them barely human. The process started before arrest. Denunciation could come from anyone: a jealous neighbor, a rejected suitor, a daughter angry at her mother's discipline. The Inquisition paid informants, creating an economy of accusation where turning in heretics became more profitable than honest labor. Once denounced, a woman's fate was essentially sealed. In 500 years of operation, the Spanish Inquisition's acquittal rate was less than 2%. But mere accusation triggered immediate consequences. The moment Maria de Cazala's name appeared in the Inquisition's ledgers, she ceased to legally exist. Her property was seized for safekeeping. Her children were removed to protect them from corruption. Her husband was forbidden to speak her name or acknowledge their marriage. She became a non-person before ever seeing the inside of a cell. The arrest itself was choreographed humiliation. Inquisitors arrived at dawn, ensuring maximum witnesses. Maria was dragged from her bed in her nightclothes, denied even the dignity of dressing. Neighbors watched from doorways as she was loaded into a cage cart, the same type used for transporting animals to slaughter. The parallel was intentional. Transportation to the Inquisition's prison could take days. No food was provided, no water unless guards felt merciful, no privacy for bodily functions. By the time Maria reached Toledo's underground cells, she had already been systematically dehumanized, weakened, and isolated. The real interrogation hadn't even started. Those cells defied description, not through luxury or even particular squalor, but through calculated sensory deprivation. No windows, no variation in temperature, no way to tell day from night. The only sounds were distant screams, precisely timed to occur at irregular intervals, preventing sleep while building anticipation of future agony. Female prisoners faced unique degradations. Male guards conducted searches multiple times daily, hunting for diabolic marks or hidden items. These searches required complete nudity, spreading of limbs, invasive examination of every orifice. The pretext was security. The reality was systematic sexual humiliation designed to break down any sense of bodily autonomy or personal dignity. Here's where the Inquisition's genius for cruelty truly shone. They made their victims complicit in their own torture. Maria wasn't simply starved. She was given a daily choice between food and maintaining her innocence. Confess to heresy, receive bread, maintain innocence, receive nothing. After 5 days without food, watching other prisoners eat, most chose confession. But confession meant specifying crimes, and here the Inquisitors displayed their theological sadism. They wouldn't tell Maria what she was accused of. She had to guess, and each wrong guess was treated as evidence of additional crimes she was hiding. Confess to reading the Bible? Now, explain where you got it. Name who taught you to read. Identify everyone who knew and didn't report you. Each answer spawned 10 new questions, 10 new potential heresies, 10 new names to feed the Inquisition's endless appetite. The physical positioning during questioning was precisely calculated. Maria knelt on sharp stones while inquisitors sat elevated above her. She looked up into light sources that blinded her while keeping interrogators' faces in shadow. Her arms were bound behind her at an angle that started uncomfortable and progressed to agony over hours. This wasn't random cruelty, but studied manipulation of power dynamics. When simple questioning failed, they introduced demonstrations. Maria would be shown the instruments that awaited her, the rack that would dislocate every joint, the boots that would crush ankle bones to powder, the pears that would expand inside body cavities until tissue tore. She would watch other women undergo these tortures, their screams carrying through stone walls that conducted sound with horrifying clarity. Yet physical torture was often unnecessary. The Inquisition had discovered that uncertainty was more effective than pain. Maria didn't know when interrogation would come. Guards would drag her from her cell at random intervals, sometimes returning her immediately, sometimes keeping her standing naked in the chamber for hours without questioning. The anticipation of torture became torture itself. Sleep deprivation was their masterpiece. Not the crude denial of rest, but scientific destruction of circadian rhythm. Meals came at random times. Guards changed shifts unpredictably. Prayers were demanded at intervals that might be 2 hours or 20. Within a week, Maria couldn't tell if she'd been imprisoned for days or months. Reality became negotiable. The chamber itself was a psychological weapon. Latin phrases covered the walls, biblical verses about divine justice and the wages of sin. But mixed among them were names, hundreds of names of previous occupants, some crossed out, some circled, some accompanied by dates and cryptic symbols. Maria would stare at those names for hours, wondering if they survived, wondering if her name would join them, wondering if anyone would remember it existed. They broke her on the 8th day, not through torture, but through kindness. A young inquisitor, barely out of seminary, brought her clean water and spoke gently about God's infinite mercy for repentant sinners. After a week of systematic brutalization, this tiny gesture of humanity shattered her remaining defenses. She confessed to everything, reading scripture, teaching her children prayers, believing she could speak directly to God without priestly mediation. The confession was meticulously recorded, read back to her for accuracy, signed with a hand that shook so badly the signature was illegible. Only then did they inform her that confession was not absolution but evidence. The trial would proceed. The confession simply determined which category of heretic she was, and therefore which variety of living hell awaited her. But confession guaranteed she would live, at least initially. Death would be too simple, too quick. The Inquisition had developed far more creative solutions for women who dared to define their own faith. Survival meant something different in the vocabulary of the Inquisition. When Maria learned she would not burn, relief lasted exactly as long as it took the Inquisitor to explain her sentence. Perpetual penance through service to God's representatives on earth. The words sounded almost merciful. The reality would make her pray for the flames she'd been spared. Female heretics who confessed faced a sadistic lottery. Some were sentenced to convents as slaves. Others were given to brothels as instruction in humility. A few were assigned as servants to the very families who had denounced them. Each fate was carefully chosen to maximize both suffering and social example. Maria drew the convent. But calling it a convent implies religious community, spiritual purpose, some fragment of dignity. What awaited Maria was none of these things. The convent of perpetual penitence was a prison where the church could hide its embarrassments. Mad nobles, pregnant nuns, and heretic women whose public execution might generate sympathy. She arrived wearing the San Benito, a yellow garment painted with devils and flames that marked her as condemned. She would wear this same garment, unwashed, for the remainder of her life. As it rotted, she would patch it. As it fell apart, she would hold it together with rough thread. But she could never remove it, never replace it, never escape its declaration of her damnation. The other nuns, real nuns, were forbidden to speak to her, look at her, or acknowledge her existence except when issuing orders. She was present but invisible, human but untouchable, alive but socially deceased. She slept on stone in the cellar with the rats. She ate scraps from the kitchen after even the dogs had been fed. She worked from before dawn until after midnight, every single day, without rest, without respite, without hope. Her duties were chosen for maximum degradation, cleaning latrines with her bare hands, washing menstrual rags by mouth, when the convent's water was reserved for pure residents, carrying corpses of elderly nuns to burial plots, then digging the graves alone while others prayed over the departed. Every task that could humiliate, exhaust, or endanger was reserved for the San Benito wearers. But physical labor was just the foundation. The true torture was spiritual. Every morning, Maria attended Mass, but was forbidden from receiving communion. She watched others partake of salvation while knowing she was eternally excluded.